Is this in English?
This is.
Welcome in English. I'm Karen.
I'm Christina, and this is Subtitles.
Yeah.
In English.
In English.
Spanglish
That means
sometimes.
today is Thursday.
Yes, that means today will be Thursday, because technically...
Today will be Thursday.
Yes.
Let's speak as though today is the moment in which we are speaking.
Sure, because this is clearly recorded live.
Yes.
Whenever you watch it.
live. That's not the right word that I want to use, but for those of you that want to listen in Spanish, or hear us speak in Spanish, not listen in Spanish. Do you listen in Spanish?
You can hear in Spanish, probably.
Tune in on Mondays, and if you want to practice reading it as well, it's very helpful for those of you that want to practice another language. My God. You can actually hit the 3 buttons at the top right, I believe, and it'll give you a captions option, which is really
on YouTube.
Cool. On YouTube, right.
Right.
So that's kind of neat. You know, you could follow along. It's not always super accurate, depending on the vocabulary we use, how quickly we speak, the slang, and all that
some
stuff.
of the idioms.
But it's great to follow along. It's a great learning tool, I think.
Yeah.
So try it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're brave enough to, just listen to the podcast without watching on YouTube with captions, I also think that's a really nice way to force yourself to see what you do get.
Yeah.
Watch
the same episode like 5 times with captions and turn them off.
Rate it each time. Leave questions every single time.
Notice the nuance. The conversation's so layered and so mature.
Yeah, I feel like today we're in a little bit of an immature
I just had some coffee.
mindset.
Which
kind of ties in as a nice little segue to our topic.
Which is, when do we become adults?
If ever.
Right. What does it mean?
Hollywood, you never know.
Do we have to define adult first?
I think we should. I think we should define adulthood or maturity, I guess, the way we would, consider it.
Okay, and let's further define it. When do society kind of classify you as an adult?
Yeah.
And when do you
we'll have
feel
Jess,
like
our producer, who's looking up the definition.
Oh, great.
As
Let's see what Merriam-Webster thinks, or whatever.
Or
the Oxford English Dictionary. The OED says that you're an adult when X.
But meanwhile, how do we interpret adulthood? When did you feel like an adult? Let me ask you that. Let's start with that.
I think the moment I started making financial decisions on behalf of other people.
On behalf of other people, more than just yourself, or when you started making them for yourself? Because most people don't necessarily have dependents, maybe.
I think a lot of it was tied to like generating income.
Okay, so I still started making money.
I started making money, and also, but I think too, like, the money wasn't huge. I was an assistant at a talent agency, so making money is like, it was seriously.
You were getting a paycheck.
I was getting a paycheck. It was pocket change at best. But I was starting to look at other people's financial contracts and operating independently and making things happen kind of on my own. Now, I think that was the first moment where I'm like, oh, I've got a job. This is now going to be the rest of my life sort of thing.
Right.
I think you and I have spoken about like how I think I had the realization. I'm like, oh, work is like homework, except it's all day long.
Yeah.
And I was like, I guess this is adulthood, or at least it's initiation. And then over time, I think probably recognizing my parents as other people versus just their role as my parents.
Right.
And having that separation made me feel like, oh, adulthood. That you see them in a different way. That kind of felt like a personal version of adulthood as opposed to a societal version of adulthood.
Okay.
Like, so there's income generation, adulthood, and then there's those kind of like interpersonal relationships where you're like, these are human beings who had children, myself and my brother, and actually relating to them as like from one kind of adult to another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting because all of your definitions so much relate and pertain to family because you have such a strong familiar nucleus.
Right.
That your definition of adulthood is reliant on a lot of how you interact with the other members of your family.
Right. So the first one is like independence from them.
Right.
Like
and
less
the second one
childhood.
is how you see them.
Yeah.
Which I think in contrast with someone who maybe didn't have like a strong family nucleus. I have a very strong family, but I'm not like the way you do. My definition of adulthood probably has nothing to do with my family at all. Like, I think my father actually was the one who was like, oh, when you're 18, your decisions are yours because the consequences are yours.
Well, my mother always told me, she's like, anything you do, don't do it to affect me because you're just affecting yourself. she said it.
Yeah.
But I feel like the message was very different from your dad.
Oh, for me, it was very accurate. It was very much like, if you kill someone after you're 18, even if I wanted to do something about it, you're the one going to jail. I can't go to jail for you.
Right.
If you fall in love and you're happy, you're the one being happy. But if your heart gets broken, my heart doesn't break. Like, I don't, I don't get to suffer for you.
So, but it's aligned with kind of like a state issued or like kind of society's version of like assigning a date. Right?
But I guess
you
for
turn
me,
18, you're an adult.
I felt like an adult the moment I realized, one, consequences of my actions were mine. No one else was ever going to take the fall or like really bear the burden or whatever. Like there was never someone there to quote unquote rescue you. When I realized that, which was probably much younger than that, was probably around like 14. Yeah. Because I was living alone, and so I was like, having a lot of those repercussions by myself. Yeah. But also, I think to me is the moment I actually started making decisions, not based on what I wanted, but kind of on like what was best for me. Like I hated it. I remember just the moment when you're like, well, I want to spend this money on X, Y, or Z, or I want to eat this, or I want to go out with my friends and party. I should stay home and study for my exams at university. Yeah, when you're making decisions based on that really you used to think your parents would make or someone else would like enforce willingly. Without that enforcement.
I'm trying to think. Consequences, I can't really, I didn't think too much about consequences, only because, first off, I generally was that kid who didn't, I pushed limits in questioning them, but never in breaking things. So, why do I have to do this? Why? Just one of those incessant why children that adults understandably find super annoying. But I still kind of, I always thought to myself, oh, if I escape out the window in the middle of the night, I would want to do it. Odds are nothing would happen to me. But if it did happen, then I'm ruining a bunch of other people's lives. So I would be like, I shouldn't do it. It's not worth it. Yeah. So I'm not going to say I'm an old soul, but like, I was like, probably shouldn't do it.
I would be like the Instagram reel meme thing, like, no one's going to know. Yeah. No one's going to know. No one would know. I would just like, I want to go out the window. I'd go out the window. Yeah. But how does, Jess, tell us.
Everything I saw was about legality. Right. So when you can vote, when you can drink, when you can vote, society thinks you have to be able to do those things. It has nothing to do with how you feel. It's okay, you can legally do these things.
Right. Yeah, they have to find some sort of cutoff point. But I mean, talk about different states in the union, different countries in the world. Yeah. You can get married at 14. Does that make you an adult? Does having your period as a girl, it's like it made you an adult?
I was just going to say, like, if you look at it biologically, you're talking about leaving a developmental area, and stage of your life when it comes to cognitive development and when it comes to more than physical one, which I think is what you're talking about with like the period or whatever, making you a woman, for example. In the past,
right?
So right. Traditionally.
Even though you can have your period and still your body can't handle a pregnancy. Absolutely. And what does that mean for little boys that can probably impregnate at any age? Gross. Anyway, like, does that mean he's like 10, you're like, you're a man, or 9? I mean, let's not go down that path.
Oh, little man, right? You're like, little man.
Little man.
But yeah, I think that if we're talking about it scientifically and we're talking about like the cognitive development of somebody, we're looking at somebody who the neuroplasticity, exactly, like kind of stops really accelerating at such a rapid rate. Where now it's not impossible, and of course if you listen to Andrew Huberman and you talk about like, to people who are really fascinated by neuroplasticity, because now it's a very trending topic, it doesn't necessarily stop, but in general, we do stop kind of like learning at a certain rapid rate. And I think that implies you are who you are, kind of a thing. At that point, you're not growing, your brain is not growing in the same way. You are fully developed.
You aren't imprinting new experiences for the purposes of like preparing for life. You've prepared for life. Now
now live.
You're and now go.
Yeah. Also, if you want to like kind of go all the way into some of the, I want to call it psychobabble because I'm not very well informed. I'm sure there are some accurate things, but like I remember, there's a lot of Freudian interpretations into like teeth and kind of like those being a sign, those being a sign of that jump in stage, right? So when you get your teeth, you become an infant or a child. And then, you know, when you get los de leche, dientes de leche.
The milk teeth. Primary teeth?
No. Primary teeth? What are the little teeth?
Little baby teeth.
Baby teeth.
Wow. Whoa. Primary teeth?
We call them milk teeth in Spanish.
Yeah, milk teeth. I'm sure it's a thing in other languages too.
You know, baby teeth, when you lose your baby teeth and you get your full-blown, you know, kind of denture, I guess, and that becomes you going into more of an adult phase.
Yeah.
And then when you lose them again, you go into old age, right? That's like another last stage, and they talk a lot about that. But anyway, back to how this pertains to what we're talking about a lot of the time is, what do you consider, I'm assuming in Hollywood, like adult content? When do you start, you know, censorship and ratings and things like that?
Right.
When do you allow children or young adults, right? The new YA, which is like a new category now that they call in content or in media, books, literature.
Yeah.
When do you expose them to harsh realities, I would say, is what I would call it.
Harsh.
Whether it's, you know, like violence, trauma, you know, crime, sex for some people is one of those.
Because the harshness, it seems like in the States we're much more preoccupied with
sex
exposure
and
to sexual things than we are to violence.
In Europe, we're much more preoccupied with when you expose them to anything ultra-violent,
right,
or graphic in the violent nature. So it doesn't have to be like blood and guts, but it could be mass murders, it could be, you know, things like that. So it is much more about the violence than about we see nipples and we see cocks and we see vagina on commercials.
We're really interested in maintaining, I guess, innocence, like, or at least sexual innocence here. And I wonder what that's about. Like, in the States, we've talked about it before, puritanical beginnings, you know, or, no, I feel like, for me, it went back to puritanical. You had another reason.
Oh, for me, I just remember, in the States, the biggest difference that I noticed was, it was devoid, the conversations were always devoid of, discussing the pleasure or the benefits or the good sides of those things. Like, teenagers get exposed to sex, but it's always based on STDs, pregnancies, the dangers of getting pregnant.
Speaking from experience in Catholic school.
Exactly.
It was all about STDs.
Whereas the conversations in Europe may have some of that. By the way, we don't have as prevalent STDs. We don't have unwanted pregnancies the way they do in the States. So we don't have that much of a it's not that important of a topic because we just don't have it.
Right.
But we do talk a lot about consent. We talk a lot about courtship. We talk a lot about pleasure for women, especially, like how they're supposed to be the ones navigating those barriers based on their own pleasure, not based on the desire or not based, right? Okay. So it's, again, we talk about it all the time. Men pursue, women stop.
Yeah.
But not because of the dangers, but because you need to prove that it'll be pleasurable in a certain sense.
Yeah.
But I don't know what, like, the biggest maybe difference is, other than the fact that for some reason violence, the same way here violence is devoid of repercussions in a developmental brain according to society.
Okay.
Right? Kids will play Grand Theft Auto and kill hookers and
set people on fire.
You know, exactly. Yeah. And they'll watch Hunger Games where little kids are killing each other with bows and arrows, and that's okay. But God forbid you see a nipple.
Oh my God, Janet Jackson.
Yeah. So we'll get into all of what is censorship, ratings, and a little bit of more of that, right? Like the media into what is adulthood after our little break. And we're back.
Like, so yeah, porn. Go ahead.
Yes. So OnlyFans. So okay, ratings and kind of content, which we're gonna be talking about film ratings. So the MPAA, that's kind of like the Motion Picture Association. That's what is really what we're going to be talking about. But it applies to everything, right? Video games, it applies to literature, books have their own ratings, and I think video games, music, radio, same thing. They have their own ratings.
Yeah, that's true. Radio edits, right?
But talking about in general, we have the G, which is general audiences. We then have PG, which is parental guidance suggested. We have PG-13, which is parents strongly cautioned.
13 here in the States, 7th to 8th grade.
Yeah. R rated, which is under 17 requires accompanying parent, and NC-17 is adults only, over 17. God, funny that it's 17, even? By the way. Not 18.
Not 18.
Not 17. 16. 17. Yeah, I guess maybe because the year you turn 18, maybe you're considered, supposedly. I don't know.
I do remember getting somebody to buy tickets for me and my friends to go see the Madonna documentary a trillion years ago. That was kind of fun. We really felt so naughty. And then also to see Silence of the Lambs. I actually got tickets to some Disney movie, and then we went to go see Silence of the Lambs. And I think that must have been like 8th grade. And I wondered, that must have been an R. Come on. That Buffalo Bill scene?
Yeah. Well, so one of some of the components, right? So I was pulling it up in ratings are, which we've talked about, violence and sexuality, which is separate from nudity, by the way.
Interesting.
And it happens the way when we shoot on set too. It's the same thing. Like sex scenes or nudity scenes. So it could be simulated sex or nudity.
So it could be
two different things.
It's in bed after sex. They're covered by a sheet. That's okay.
Yeah. Or I'm alone, but I'm in the shower. Right. Or I skinny dip in a pool or whatever. That's nudity, but not sexual, not simulated sex.
Right.
And then you also have simulated sex, which has nothing to do with nudity. I could be giving someone a blowjob on camera.
Yeah.
I'm fully dressed. He's fully dressed because obviously you don't see that part of the body.
Sure.
There's no nudity, but it's all simulated sex. So those have like different, but also language, which we haven't talked about, and substances. So drug use.
Oh.
Did not know that.
Didn't
by
either.
the way. Didn't even cross my mind.
Yeah.
Clearly we're not cool enough. But that being said, so you have all those 4 components. And I think S&P really, so standards and practices, when they review footage, I want to say that the limits are, from my understanding, somewhat arbitrary.
Right.
What's like it'll be a quantity. It'll be like you can say 1 shit and 2 fucks or whatever. It'll
I'm looking
be
up
like,
something relevant. Continue.
Yes. Meaning it's not the quality of the word per se. It's not that you can't say fuck. It's you can't say it more than once or twice, which is a little bit bizarre to me. I don't know what those are when it comes to violence, but when we talk about ratings, is this something that I don't necessarily agree with having ratings enforced by age like that.
Okay.
Unless it's kind of 2 categories. One is children's and the other one is adult or explicit. That's the way I feel online does it a lot. We have media, we have content that we can either say is explicit or we can say it's specifically designed for children.
Yeah.
In which case, I understand there has to be a lot of regulation and monitoring and making sure that you're not slipping something in there, right?
Jess, when this gets published to YouTube, don't you have to select if this is geared towards children?
Or explicit.
Geared towards children or anything else?
It just says, is this for kids?
Yeah.
Is this for kids or anything else? Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, I understand that because obviously you don't want your child watching cartoons in the morning on Saturday and it turns into hentai. Like, I get that. But, or whatever. But you don't, you also don't necessarily, I think, have to monitor how much someone is saying a certain word or like if you're because some of these teenager movies, for example, which are not NC-17 and they're not even R-rated, sometimes they're like PG-13 or whatever, they have so much stuff that is to me very much adult content.
I agree. I can't think of anything right now. I can't think of examples that come to mind, but
And then also there's content that is designed for adults, has none of those things other than maybe some language.
Yeah.
And it still is described for adults. Why? Because it's intelligent? Like, you know what I mean? Like, some of those contents where you're like, what? This applies to none of these. There's no violence. It's like a judicial movie of some sort, of some trial. And maybe they say the word fuck, but they're not showing anything else. I'm like, why can't a kid watch that?
Yeah. I don't know. Would it have a rating?
Yeah, of course they would all have ratings.
It's funny. I just don't even, like, I guess it doesn't even, I don't even hear it anymore or register it in any way because it hasn't applied to me. So, it's just completely, it's a tough one. But I do recognize that developmentally, like, people are prepared for different things, or children are able to understand or cope with things at different rates, and it's a very, very difficult line, and you have to define it, kind of just pick an age, and there's a day before and a day after, and clearly that person is the same person within those 48-hour period, but you've got to pick one. Real quick, this is always it just says here, sadly, a judge, but not his name. I can't define pornography, but I know it when I see it. And it's a great one. I really wish I had the name here. Pornography is any material, either pictures or words, that is sexually explicit. Anyway, that didn't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But I love that. I know it when I see it.
Yeah,
and that's the way to define it, I guess.
It's true. Yeah. I mean, I think, but that's what I mean, where I think these ratings feel somewhat arbitrary, because they're also probably done by polling, probably done with like large collectives of people that they're to me they're almost fear-based a lot of the time, just like anything that is like mass geared towards masses, where it's not a parent making a decision based on who their child is, on what their child can see, right? This is like, okay, we're gonna put a rating that saves us most of the time, let's face it, from its liability. It's so that a parent can't sue us if their kid sees this, has some kind of... So to me, I think those ratings are redundant a lot of the time. We know what pornography is. You should not be able to access pornography if you're a child. I understand that. We know what children's content is, which is the safety blanket of any kid should be able to watch this and not be traumatized. But the rest, I think it's stupid. I think it's really it's geared towards legal battles and financial protections and stuff of these studios, of the networks. It has nothing to do with whether or not they believe a child is capable and competent enough to emotionally, like,
it might be a useful tool for some adults who are just like, I'm not going to watch every movie first before my child watches it. So if I know it says NC-17, you know what? Blanket statement, kid, you can't watch it. Just, suck it up, wait until you're 18, and they don't have to preview everything.
But 3 of the categories are parental guidance, suggested, enforced, blah, 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 whatever. When was the last time a parent sat to watch a movie with their kids nowadays, who watch it on their phones, on Netflix, on whatever, just in general?
No, exactly.
Let alone control,
but at least, like,
be able to
at least they can
to a
say,
child.
like, if they're going to make a purchase of a film or something like that, or like, buy, like, rent something on Amazon, and they'll just go to a category that they know is safe. And so maybe it's a somewhat useful tool.
So for example, what category is Euphoria?
Jesus Christ, I have
just
no
out
idea.
of curiosity.
I also haven't seen it, but I imagine it's underage
13 reasons, 13 reasons why.
Yeah.
Or any of these shows that are the most popular shows on Netflix, on whatever, with children, with teenagers, with kids, young adults, that are literally centric to
the movie,
rape,
the movie Kids, a long time ago.
Like, so again, I think it's a matter of the young adult or the teenager. I think it's a matter of the family environment. If you have so much control over your child that you can monitor what they buy and don't watch on Netflix, then good for you. You're probably the kind of person who's probably controlling that they're not watching something inappropriate. Most people don't have that. So to me, I think the ratings, I'm not quite sure what they are designed to do realistically, other than protect the studios from liability. That's really what they're there and they're designed to do.
But I mean, the general public isn't thinking about, like, this is the studio and trying to protect itself from liability. They're just like, okay, what movies can my kid watch? This one, and again, maybe useful tool sort of thing. I think general public. Now, when it becomes restrictive to their income possibilities, then the studios are going to start also too, I'm sure, manipulating or...
What do you mean restrictive to their income?
Well, you want to get, for example, if you're making something that's geared towards kids, but then somebody slaps a PG-13 on it and you want it to have like a broader audience, then you'll start cutting bad words or making sure kids are covered up in a weird way or not suggesting that there's any making out, etc. Like, these things are also barriers.
No, or you just up the rating, which then absolves you of liability.
Well, but that's not... They're subject to the control to some extent from standards and practices MPAA.
Which is what I'm saying. So, like, instead of... networks are much more prone to having to do that.
Right.
Because they have to uphold the network rating.
Yeah.
Right? ABC cannot air full frontal. No matter what they're doing.
Yeah.
That's different. But for film, you make your film, it could be geared towards whatever you want. If we think we could get sued because there's a penis in the background, we're just going to put a higher rating. Now we're absolved.
Right, but they may think too in the future it may prevent more viewing of that film if it has a higher rating.
I don't think people the sale, because sales are done basically prior to the rating. For the most part, right? So internationally, it's one thing. Domestically, it's another.
So for theater films, or now for streaming and so
for
on?
everything.
For everything.
Everything. There's different cuts for things, especially for features. Because again, when we're talking about network, it's different, right? Because that's something that is on TV, and you have to adhere to what it is.
Yeah.
But with features and stuff, you're selling a lot of this ahead of time. Especially international sales, which then inform domestic sales, and then inform, it's kind of works its way backwards. So I don't necessarily think that they are... You're looking at it like saying, oh, this is so nice because people putting the caloric value under the McDonald's menu is informative for the audience, or for like the consumer.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, like, realistically, that's not beneficial to the consumer. That's to prevent liability. What would be beneficial to the consumer is maybe making things that aren't so high calorie value. There's like a different...
I guess, there's limitations that everybody can't be so informed, or we can't also say, like, make food that's better for me. At least some information is better than no information. So it's just, again, another tool to assist you in the complicated task of raising children. And I'm not saying it's great or I agree with whatever how they're rating. I'm just saying, like, that's a use that it serves. That's all.
Yeah, I think I disagree. I think it doesn't...
kind of like when you put a thing on a box of like a children's game, and it's small enough for a little kid to swallow it, or they might stick it in their mouth and choke. Choking hazard, not recommended for children under the age of blah. Well, it's like, but if you care enough about your kids, then you're not going to give them toys to begin with. That like all the precautions. I think we're just trying to make it so that some things, at least in terms of sales, you want to make it look like the brand cares about the consumer, which do they? Whatever. But you put that on there to avoid liability / parents take it and use it as an aid in raising children and avoiding problems.
We had in Spain, it was called Los Rombos. And it was like these diamonds, these like 2 blue or black diamonds or whatever on the corner of the TV.
Yeah.
So, kind of like where you would maybe now have the logo of the network or the whatever, right? Anytime something would come up that would be, I guess, the equivalent of NC-17. So something that was very, like, Basic Instinct comes on, which would come on at 8 p.m. or at 4 p.m. in the afternoon in Spain.
Yeah.
And kids would be able to watch it.
Yeah.
But it would always have those 2 little diamonds on the corner. So anytime a parent walked by, they would know that the kids are watching something they shouldn't be. And what was worse, and I remember this so clearly because all of my cousins and I remember us like at Christmas and whatever watching movies we probably shouldn't be watching.
Yeah.
And every commercial, after the commercial, when the movie comes back, it had this noise that no matter how low you lowered your volume,
wow, smart,
was very loud and would go ding ding like a specific ringtone almost. Yeah. And the entire house would hear it.
Right.
So everyone would know on that TV was
sexual
something
content. Yeah.
was some normally not sexual, normally violent, but yes, it would be like something, you know, funny for us. Basic Instinct was forbidden.
Yeah.
Not because of the sex, but because she uses an ice pick to actually murder someone. It was the violence in it that made it forbidden. The sexuality wasn't an issue for us. Like, no, you know how here it became very popular, like her image with the legs and all that conversation and stuff. I didn't understand what that was all about until I got to the States as an adult.
And they were like, oh my God, the Sharon Stone
wow.
scene.
And I was like, wait, when she's killing him? Like, I just remember those scenes of, like, grabbing the ice pick under the bed or whatever. That's what we remember. Yeah. It's like, ooh, we're not supposed to watch.
Yeah.
Turn away, kids. But the rombos, that was really exciting. I remember us trying to make noise so that our parents couldn't hear the ding ding or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not, my parents never stopped me from watching. I think they were just not engaged at all with whatever I was watching.
Oh, no, this was like grandma at Christmas.
Oh,
like,
well.
I think that's a little, you know, our parents didn't care, but 5 kids in front of a TV in Christmas watching something they're not supposed to is exciting.
Like, the great thing is the kids are busy.
Yeah, but for them, it's kind of like, ooh, we're getting away with something.
For sure.
They probably didn't even care.
No.
You know. That actually brings me to a question, which is, do you think that there is something that children should not be privy to informationally? Not talking about media, not talking about images per se, but like even just the telling of a story or reading of a book or whatever, when it comes to something other than, let's discuss, you know, like sex or you know, violence per se.
Yeah.
But is there anything else that you think can be very harmful?
Beyond sex and violence?
Yeah, like a certain reality of like
children
famine,
starving and other...
I don't know. Like some of the, again, harsh realities, you know, animal abuse. I guess that's also violence, but, you know, is there something that... Death. The concept of death.
I do remember reading something where children respond badly, obviously I think we all do, to a pet dying, but also too because in relation to them size-wise, oftentimes they're the same size as the child. And the idea that something can, you know, affect and this creature that's similar to them in size and they can die, even though it's a natural part and you can explain it to them, apparently it affects them very differently, which I think is kind of interesting.
But funny enough, depending on the culture. Because there are a bunch of research papers on how different cultures respond to death or what meaning they imply, like what meaning death holds. For Western cultures, for, you know, our culture, it's normally like the end of a life.
Right.
Some cultures have it as the beginning of an afterlife, or they have a different connotation.
I guess maybe pets are also very different too from farm animals. That might be a very different way of seeing things too. But still, like, the kids don't find death to be, in certain tribes and certain, like, I think it's like the Zoes and the Amazon and stuff, like, they don't find death in any way scary. They're not afraid to die. They don't think death is a bad thing. They don't think... It's really... Time for... Like, that would be another conversation for another podcast, but it's really interesting how much meaning we obviously in our culture... I guess unafraid to die versus, like, maybe...
or saddened, or...
Like, a sense of doom versus... I'm sure people would rather live than die, and they're not indifferent to death, but...
No, that's what I'm saying.
They're indifferent to death.
They just don't see it as a negative.
So if your parent dies or something, then they don't feel sadness?
No.
That's fucking fascinating, and I need to find out more about that.
We need to read more about this and figure it out for next time.
Interesting. I don't even know if it's a good thing, but it's interesting. On that fucking upper.
Yeah. We will be back next week.
Or not, because who cares?
Indifferent to the death of subtitles. No, come on.
I would be sad.
We would be sad.
All right, bye.
And our producer, who is like,
she's making a running motion. I suppose that means hurry.